Good afternoon, my friends. I want to talk today about how the limbic system plays a role in relationships in general. I've talked about relationships like in terms of creating healthy relationships. I've talked about the purpose of relationships, but this is more just the role the limbic system plays in relationships. It's really quite fascinating. I really found so much was cleared up for me when I started doing this. I was like, oh, this makes a whole lot more sense. So I am going to explain what I mean by that. So the limbic system, again, it's just your emotional center in your brain. This is just all about brain function. And people talk about there being a mind-body connection. This is like the work we do in rewiring the limbic system is tapping into the mind-body connection, because our emotions are that's what we believe emotionally. Like when we actually believe something, we're fully bought into a belief, then we will feel the emotional and physiological effects of that belief. For example, if you find, and again, this is where too, like a lot of times I see people talk about their beliefs. They're like, I've seen things on Facebook where people are like, oh, it's not your beliefs, it's for your behavior that matters. I'm like, your behavior is your lived beliefs. That's what it is. We act on what we actually believe. We may think, it's almost like, again, this is why I work so much on core beliefs and rewiring them and wiring them into your limbic system, because otherwise you have beliefs that are in your head, but they're not in your heart, they're not in your body, they're not embodied beliefs, they're just in your head, and they're disconnected from how you actually live your life. And those aren't your actual beliefs. Those are ideas in your head that have nothing to do with your life. What I'm talking about here are your actual lived beliefs. One example would be if you have a deeply ingrained belief that home is a safe place, and home is where you can relax, where you can let go, where all the pressure's off. When you get home from work or you get home from a long trip and you see your house and you pull into your driveway, you're going to feel an overwhelming sense of relaxation in your body, because you know on a physical level, this place is a safe place. This place I can relax, I can let go, I can put some pajamas on, I can watch a movie, I can just be who I am. I don't have to put on there's no need to perform, etc. That's an example of a belief that's, fully wired into your emotional system. So, and how this works too is that in all of this is too, the subconscious programming, as I've stated before in some of my videos, this is all about subconscious programming. And when you rewire core beliefs, you're putting in new subconscious programming into your subconscious brain. And the subconscious brain, like if you look at that word subconscious, it's below consciousness. So when it comes to relationships with other people, this is where you just pick up on what people are feeling or thinking. And there's a lot of times, I'm sure everyone watching this has at some point been with someone and been like, you're saying that, but that's not really what you're thinking. Like you were insisting that this is what you're thinking and this is what you believe. And it's like, I'm not buying it, because their body language and their mannerisms and their tone of voice and all of these other things that are, again, you cannot hide that. That's where all the subconscious beliefs come out and play out, is in all those little subtle things. And I've heard it said, and I believe it, that it's 90% of communication is nonverbal and 10% is spoken. That 90% that is subconscious, that's your subconscious. So you can tell what people believe, you can tell what they're thinking in a sense, like you can tell kind of what's going on. And when you pick up on those cues, and even if you're not paying attention, you pick up on them without knowing it. For example, if you, one example, when I used to, before I rewired my brain, be much more concerned when my children got hurt. I would panic if my children got hurt. And I had an experience with, my mother-in-law is a nurse, and she comes over once a week and helps with the kids and the house. And a couple of years ago, my youngest child, little boy, twin, it's one of those moments where his older brother, who's 2 years older, like I saw him through a doorway, and the older brother was pulling on the door, trying to get it to shut. And I just knew instantly in that moment that there was a finger in that door. And the little one, who was like one and a half maybe at the time, he was about 1.5. He had his pinky finger in like the hinge of the door, and his brother was trying to pull it shut. And he came out, his finger was like it was like flattened at one point. And I was panicking. And my mother-in-law, being a nurse with all this medical knowledge, and she's just a very calm woman. She's very grounded. She's not limbic. She's very, very calm no matter what. And between that and her medical knowledge, she was like, oh, it's mostly cartilage. It'll be fine. And, you know, in 2 minutes, his finger had popped back up and he was playing with it like nothing had happened. And it was fine. And it was in that moment, my limbic system subconsciously picked up on her being so calm and nonchalant about it. And I was like, oh, this isn't a big deal. This isn't a big deal. This can be not a big deal. Like, I don't have to make a big deal about this. And it was a huge aha moment for me just because, and like, my mother-in-law wasn't trying to calm me. She wasn't trying to do anything. She was just being herself. And those are her beliefs. And it rubbed off on me because I was like, I like that. I want to be able to be that calm when my kids are hurt. Like, that would be really helpful if I don't freak out every time my kid, you know, smashes a finger or gets a cut or something. And so I began to notice, and then when I rewired with and this was so much with my relationship with my husband, and I want to point something out. This is kind of leading to another thing I want to talk about, how for those people watching who do DNRS, we talk about how there's a limbic trauma loop within our own brain. And you have, you know, the emotion or the behavior or the thought pattern and the physical things that kind of go around and around in a circle, and you get stuck in this looping pattern where, for example, you know, you have an it, and the it is causing you frustration, or, you know, causes a negative emotion, which then creates more of the negative brain chemistry, which then, you know, intensifies the symptom, and so on, and round and round you go, and you're stuck in a limbic trauma loop. That happens in relationships too. Because we have these subconscious cues, we're playing off of each other. I realized that my fear of my husband, he was picking up on that, and then without him knowing it, his limbic system was afraid of me, and it was like our fear of each other was feeding off of, they were feeding off of, like, our limbic systems were feeding off of each other and creating this interpersonal limbic trauma loop, because we'd had some stuff go on in the past, but this pattern of fear and anger and distrust was continuing to perpetuate this negative reaction. So we would misinterpret and overreact to each other a lot. And it created its own loop that had to be stopped. And that's the case in all, you know, people. It's just amazing how much power we have, and how much you can learn from people, you know. And if, again, this is one reason why for people who are doing DNRS too, a tip, this is something I've done extensively. I've sought out watching interviews of people who are people I want to be like, because they live out their beliefs. Emma Thompson's a great example. I love Emma Thompson, and she's hilarious, and she's just wildly crazy all the time, and I love it. That's how I want to be. That's how I live my life. I'm just authentic all the time. And this was like a year ago, though, I started watching her and being like, I want to be like that. That's my goal. I want to be able to be that authentic on freaking television. Like, if that's ever right, like, I just want to be able to be that free. And when you watch people, your brain starts firing in the same places that theirs are firing in when they're acting that way, mirror neurons. And it's a really powerful way to learn, you know, if you want a belief, look at a person who's got that belief, and you can start to see how they think, how they emote, what they say, how they behave. Watching interviews, people will talk about, like, their thought process and why they do things, or how they got to where they are, or how they interpret different parts of their life. And that's education. Like, that's learning how to actually become something, because so much of life it's about what we create in our lives is based on who we are, and we act based on our beliefs, and that creates our reality. So studying people who believe the things you want to believe and have the ways of being you want to have is really powerful. So to go back to the limbic loop between people, though, because again, this is really common for those of us doing DNRS, and in life in general, to just realize that you have this power is incredibly potent. It's really, really far-reaching. So whenever there's a situation, and it could be small or it could be huge, it really doesn't matter, the severity of it, just like with your own brain and your own limbic system impairment, the severity and the size of it doesn't matter. What matters is that you take action. That's all it matters. And it's just a matter of time before the situation changes. So if someone else is behaving in a negative way, you have to be pretty solid in yourself and your own beliefs, and pretty grounded within yourself in order to do this. But you can be kind of the grounded person. And when you stop reacting to the other person, they subconsciously begin to feel safe without ever thinking about it or ever putting any effort. When you continuously do not react to another person's negativity, their attacks on you, etc., when you genuinely do not, and this is what boundaries are too. And I think a lot of people think of boundaries as like, I put up a boundary with this person, they're not allowed to do this to me. And it's like, that's about 15% of boundaries. The other 85% is you not letting it in emotionally. So that people could say anything to you and you stay calm. That's what boundaries are. Boundary is your own internal ability to not let it in. That's what boundaries are. There is a very small percentage of the time where you'll have to actually put like physical consequences if the person doesn't respect, you know, a more exterior thing, like you have to not do this or not say this or so on. But most of it is understanding that if you stop reacting, you're not feeding the trauma loop and it begins to die off. And subconsciously that person begins to feel safe with you because it's their 3-year-old that was reacting in fear. And just like our own 3-year-olds, when we give that consistent boundary and we do not react no matter what, they begin to understand that they don't have any power, and they stop being afraid because they've been allowed to, you know, the fear comes from this feeling of being out of control. You know, they're looking for a boundary. They're looking for knowing that they cannot misbehave, that because 3-year-olds cannot run the show. And when they are given that responsibility, they completely freak out because that's not possible for them to do. So there's this escalating panic that happens when they're allowed to be running the show and running your emotions and your behaviors and your thoughts. And that's why interior boundaries are so important. Because when you do not allow your 3-year-old brain to run your life, when you do not act on that fear impulse, when you don't act on anger, when you don't act on fortune telling or resentment or like a sense of trying to get revenge, when you don't act on those things, your own brain realizes, hey, I don't like it. It learns it doesn't have any power anymore. It learns that you're using your prefrontal cortex to do things in a more adult way, and that it doesn't have power because your behavior and your emotions and your thoughts are lined up with what you actually want, and you're not acting on those negative reactive emotions anymore. Your own brain gets the idea that, hey, oh, this is my higher self, this other person, there's an adult in here running the show. And the same thing happens with other people. Their 3-year-old gets the same understanding that, oh, there's an adult there running the show, and no matter how angry I get, I can't affect them. On a subconscious level, frequently without any thought, the other person's gonna stop. Like they might, like your own brain, they might kind of try to be manipulative in other sneaky ways first, but eventually they're gonna stop. Because their own brain, like subconsciously, they realize, like, I'm not getting anywhere. Like being angry at this person, being afraid of this person, like nothing happens. So they stop, it stops, it kind of, that pathway dies off. And again, I'm not going to address that here, but a small percentage of the time with certain people, you do have to actually cut ties and stop talking to them because they'll keep coming no matter what. There are small situations, but the vast majority of people will respond to you acting and behaving in a new way, having new emotions, having new things that you say and new ways you behave. But this is the key. You have to believe it 100% for yourself, or else it's not going to affect them. If you have to be very, very, very grounded in believing in your own worth, in your own value, that your own peace is priceless and that it's never worth it to react to someone. And when you truly believe that, you remain truly and authentically, I'm even getting like a relaxation response from saying that, you begin to live that, and it's that authenticity, the fact that you actually believe it, that changes the other person. So it's not possible to manipulate using this. You have to be actually believing it yourself. And I'm going to give an example for that. It's actually related to this guy here, who I love, my beautiful phoenix. I wanted to get this tattoo because of my journey. It represents every aspect of my journey to me. It's a sign of death and rebirth. And the phoenix, the myth or the legend of the phoenix is that it creates its own funeral pyre, and it starts the fire to kill, like to burn itself, so that it can become born again, so that it can become, and it's born always younger, stronger, and bigger and more powerful each time it's reborn. And that is the process I found with this process of rewiring, as I began a way of life where I'm always seeking to be consumed in the fire of love and be reborn new and stronger and younger and more powerful in my life. And so this was the most amazing symbol I could think of. So if you like probably 4 or 5 months ago, I was like, I'm going to get a tattoo. And then I decided it was the fact of the phoenix. And then I was like, okay, I need to get this sooner rather than later because it really holds a lot of significance. And I felt like there was something missing because it wasn't there. And I made enough money and I saved up the money for it. I told my husband I was getting it. He was not pleased. He had a conversation. He kind of sat me down and wanted to talk to me about this decision. And he's like, I just want to share my thoughts. And I was able to, I just was like, I listened and I was like, I understand where you're coming from, but that doesn't change what I'm doing because this is what I care about. And I did not argue at all because he had a lot of things to say about it. And I could have, you know, my old limbic self would have tried to argue and prove my point. And and convince him, you know, of, well, I'm a better person, I'm changed now, like I'm gonna have, like, I know and try to convince him of my standpoint. And I didn't feel the need to. I was like, I know where I stand. I know that this is the right thing to do for me. You know, I know my values. I know, you know, like I know where I can see the bigger picture, and I don't need him to understand it. I know it for myself. So I was calm and empathetic, and I listened. But at the same time, I was like, I'm getting this tattoo because this is my value. And I, you know, and that was it. And I went and did it. And even the tattoo artist told me that a lot of times people cancel because their significant other is not interested, doesn't like the idea. And so it was kind of an interesting affirmation that, yeah, it did take guts to do that, but ultimately it ended up not being a big deal because I didn't let it be a big deal. I was calm about it. The day came for me to get it, and my husband's like, what, on your agenda today? And I was like, I'm going to get this tattoo. And I could tell he was like, not happy about it, but I just was like, I made the plan, you know, 6 weeks before, went and did it, came home. I just went about the day as if everything was normal, because everything was normal, and it was nothing. It was truly like the day passed, everything went on, like our relationship is growing continuously over time now. It's starting to really blossom actually recently. But it's partly because, you know, that's what it takes for a healthy relationship, is two independent individuals who are grounded in their own beliefs and their own values, who are able to create a life together, create an interdependent relationship. So this is just one concrete example of how you have to be very grounded in your beliefs in order to impact other people and create a peaceful environment. And that's the thing too, like as I've rewired, my home has become far more peaceful, harmonious, and productive just because I have. And it's just those mirror neurons. I've even noticed my oldest daughter was laughing the other day, and it was this very big, open, joyful laugh. And I was like, that sounds like my laugh. And it's like those things just rub off over time. And it does take a lot of time, but it's really beautiful to see. So I'm just offering this kind of as an understanding and insight into how the limbic system plays into like how core beliefs become embodied, what that looks like, and then how it rubs off on other people, and how there can be a trauma loop between two people, but one person can stop it. Not entirely, like you can't heal a relationship one-sided, but you can stop the negative loop. And a lot of times too, in order for a relationship to heal, there's a lot of time of it just being very neutral and kind of feeling a little bit forced, because you're both like, or at least one person. And that's the thing, is if you stop reacting, the other person's going to have to face their own problems and their own emotions, because you're not feeding into it anymore and you're not reacting, and they're left alone with their own emotions. So they have to face it. And some people don't want to face it. Some people are open to it. So how that plays out is different, but that's where all of your power lies, in relationship to other people when it comes to rewiring core beliefs, how your own limbic system is functioning, and how that looks in a really embodied way. So yeah, and then again, that kind of extra snippet, if for mood elevation and rewiring of core beliefs purposes, do seek out interviews with people who embody the beliefs you want to have, because that is the most efficient way to learn it, because mirror neurons require no effort. Our brains automatically fire in the same places and the same patterns as someone else when we're watching them talk or do an activity or whatever. So just watching people who you admire and want to be like, you'll automatically pick up on their mannerisms, their belief patterns, their ways of thinking. So that's a great, just really easy way to kind of give yourself some cushion as you're in the process of rewiring, or if you're someone who's wanting to act in a different way and behave and have different thoughts and emotions. Hang out with people who are the kind of people you want to be like, and it'll literally just rub off on you like magic fairy dust. It's amazing. Yeah, that's it for today. Much love to you, my friends.